Alright, so which is the best way to access and see the Na Pali Coast? Is it by helicopter, by foot, or by boat? Today we're gonna go find out. Alright, so I have wanted to go and do this exact trip that we're about to go do for a long time, well before I was ever even into taking photos. The landscapes on Kauai are absolutely crazy, and I remember seeing pictures of these even back when I was like 16 years old. And some of these areas are so remote and they're so hard to get to, you can really only access them if you're willing to hike into them or by helicopter. Now, I've actually been to Kauai before this trip. This will be my third time visiting the island, but this time we are going all out. Now in this video, we're gonna spend exactly 48 hours on the island of Kauai. And in that 48 hours, we're gonna do a helicopter tour, do a boat tour of the Na Pali Coast, and we're gonna hike the Na Pali Coast. And as an added bonus, we're gonna do some tubing. Now, when you go to do a helicopter tour on the island of Kauai, one of the things that's really important is that you have some kind of strap with you. A lot of these tour companies, they don't want things to fly off of you as you're riding in the helicopter, so a lot of them have very strict rules about the things you can carry on with you. Now, the helicopter tour I did, they actually didn't want any loose items in your pockets. That includes your cell phone or any extra batteries for your camera, so no bringing extra batteries, no bringing a cell phone unless it's strapped to you physically. Now, I was made well aware of this before we ever went on the trip, so I'd actually planned ahead and I'd set all of my camera straps aside in a special place so that I would pack them before we went all the way to Hawaii. And when we landed in Oahu, I realized I had forgotten to pack all of my camera straps. Now, lucky for us, we were spending about 2 days on Oahu before flying to the island of Kauai, so I started to panic, and of course I looked on Amazon, and unfortunately, because the islands have very interesting shipping rules and that sort of thing, I wasn't able to find anything on Amazon, any kind of camera strap of any kind that could get to me in 2 days. It just wasn't going to happen. Now, just by coincidence, luckily for us, there's actually a camera store located within about 2 miles of where we were staying on Oahu, and as far as I could tell, it's the only legitimate camera store, at least with the type of camera equipment I would be looking for on the entire island of Oahu. So we ended up stopping in, and I blew a bunch of money on some Peak Design straps, which are hands down the best. So of course you have the Peak Design quick tabs. So I knew if I had these tabs already on my camera, which I did, and I got a Peak Design strap, I would be set that way. So I got a wrist strap and a couple neck lanyards and a couple other options, including some for the phone. My thought process was that I would be able to take 2 cameras strapped to me with different straps, but when we arrived to do the helicopter tour, they pretty much told me I could only have one and nothing in my pockets. Now, that camera store was awesome. I'll leave a link to their website down there below. It was called Pro Camera Hawaii, I believe, and it was located in Aiea, not too far from the town of Honolulu. Now, for us, we were actually a little bit tight for time for this trip. We only had 48 hours, and I wanted to try and pack as much as I possibly could in that 40 hours. And just the way that worked out, the helicopter tour was the very first thing. So right off the plane, we landed on Kauai at like 9 a.m. and then we just went straight from the airport to the helicopter tour. Now, I had never been on a helicopter before, at least not a doors off helicopter like this one. That was my first time ever flying like that. And almost immediately when we took off, the weather that we just happened to encounter while we were out there was really crazy. It was constant rainstorms. Someone actually died like a couple days before we landed on Kauai trying to hike the Kalalau Trail on the Na Pali Coast at Crawler's Ledge because of the weather. And so the weather was just terrible. I mean, it was like a rainstorm, it was windy. It wasn't quite a thunderstorm, but there was a lot of wind, really high wind, and a lot of rain. And almost immediately, I mean, we were like maybe 300 or 400 feet off the ground, off of the tarmac, and instantly the wind picked up and you could just feel the whole helicopter drop. Like the feeling of turbulence you experience on an airplane when it feels like the airplane drops for a split second and then it hits like another hard pocket of air. That feeling, but over and over and over again. And the propeller makes a funny sound when it hits those different pockets of air. It'll go from moving faster to slower to faster. And so that was pretty scary for the first 10 seconds of being in the helicopter, feeling like we were crashing, basically. The pilot was incredible. She managed to stabilize everything very quickly and everything was fine. But that was the first time I'd ever experienced being in a helicopter, so that feeling kind of put me off guard for the rest of the flight. Now honestly, I think flying really would not have been that scary if it weren't for the weather that we were experiencing while we were flying, which was really crazy, just really crazy high force winds. And every time that high force wind would come in, the helicopter would experience that moment where it would kind of drop or it would shift suddenly. And it was those kind of unexpected stomach drop feelings that I think really made it hard to focus or concentrate for a lot of the flight. Now, of course, that was just luck of the draw, and I think we actually picked maybe one of the worst days for weather just by coincidence to do something like this. But the pilot did manage to get us all the way around to the Na Pali Coast. So the way this flight works, it starts at the airport in Lihue, and then you fly up. Basically, you go around the island this direction. I'm not sure what direction that would be. You go south first, I guess, and then you move kind of in a circle around the entire island. So you go over Waimea Canyon first, then over to the Na Pali Coast, and then from the Na Pali Coast over by Tunnel Beach, and then kind of like the grand finale, they fly you back into Blue Hole or the Weeping Wall. Now, I did manage to get some incredible photos of the Na Pali Coast on the way out there, but it was a lot more challenging than I was expecting to photograph anything from a helicopter. I expected the helicopter blades to create a lot of vibration, and I expected them to be in certain angles of the shots, but that vibration was a lot more intense than I thought it was going to be, and it definitely shows up in videos. And it was also a lot harder to get images without the blades in them or without some kind of motion, some kind of shake. Even at 1/2000th of a second, I was experiencing some images where there's a little bit of camera shake or there's a little bit of vibration happening in the images. So I think photographing and filming from a helicopter is a lot more challenging than most people would realize, simply because of those vibrations being caused by the propeller, which were a lot more severe than I would have thought. And I had anticipated there to be quite a bit of vibration and quite a bit of shake. I had thought that through, and so I was trying to shoot some slow-mo to try and compensate for that. And I had kind of planned on that being an issue, but I still think it was a little bit more significant than most people would assume. Now, the next thing that a lot of people might not think about is definitely going to happen if you're flying in a helicopter and you're trying to shoot photos or video. The propeller itself is creating a temporary blackout. And it's kind of like the strobe effect you experience when you shoot a light indoors and the light's flickering, right? So flicker basically is what's happening from the propeller. The sunlight's coming through it and then the propeller is blacking it out for half a second. What I didn't really expect is you actually experience that blackout in your vision as you're flying. There's just this constant half-second blackout happening from the propeller over your head, and so that can be a little bit annoying just visually to your eyes. And so if you're like epileptic or you're triggered by that type of thing, I really wouldn't recommend doing the helicopter tour because it is pretty constant. You just have that half-second blackout. You get used to it and it's not really that bad. But when you're trying to take photos, it definitely shows up in the photos more than you would think. And it shows up in video a lot more than you would think. So, of course, it's going to depend a lot on whether it's a cloudy or a sunny day, or there's a lot of things there that I think would affect it. But it was a very cloudy day when we went out. And there were moments where we were in the sun, but a lot of it was pretty even, smooth, cloudy lighting. And we were still experiencing that momentary blackout. And you can see it in some of the videos that I got. Now, here in a second, I'm going to give you guys some tips that I think would help you if you're planning on trying to shoot video or photo from a helicopter tour of the Na Pali Coast. But first, let's take you guys with us on our helicopter tour of Kauai. gonna think I'm crazy for saying this, but actually one of the better tools I think you could take with you on the helicopter is a cell phone. So I took my camera, the A7 IV, up with me in the helicopter. My wife had her phone with her the whole time, and a lot of the shots she got on her phone were actually a lot more usable and just better than some of the stuff that I got with my camera, simply because of a lot of that software and built-in gyroscope-esque type software that you're getting on something like an iPhone, where it's stabilizing the video, it's compensating for the flicker. And so I know I'm gonna get so many comments for saying this, but if you're just looking to get simple videos and simple photos, this is gonna be much easier, which I know sounds crazy, than a camera getting up into the helicopter, simply because you're not gonna be able to change lenses, you're not gonna be able to get a lot of movement. One of the things I noticed very quickly, when they seat you in the helicopter, they actually strap you down really tight across your chest so that you can't sit forward. So I always expected, you know, if the coast is over here, I would be sitting like this during the helicopter flight, shooting that way, but that's not actually the case. You're up against the back of the helicopter and you have to kind of try and like turn your body that way. And it's actually kind of an awkward movement to try and achieve to get the angle you need to get the photos. And so you can lean forward a little bit and you can loosen your seatbelt, but obviously without taking the seatbelt off, you're kind of restrained as far as your movement goes. And so I actually would recommend, instead of doing a neck lanyard, which I thought would be the better option, I would recommend just taking a wrist lanyard if you're going on a helicopter. And the reason for that is you'd think, like, you know, with the neck lanyard I can stabilize the camera by pushing it up against the neck lanyard and it's going to be a lot more secure. But one of the things that kept happening to me while we were in the helicopter was, as I would turn to try and take a photo, the wind would blow and it would actually throw the entire neck lanyard all the way over my head. So here I have the lanyard that I had with me on the helicopter. What kept happening is a gust of wind would blow up, and I had a jacket on, I had my hood back over the jacket, I had the seatbelt on top of the strap, and the wind would still blow in and the whole strap would come all the way over like that and off my arm right in front of the camera. And that was really scary, obviously, because now I just have a loose camera that could just go flying. So, you know, you have to kind of try and, like, it's awkward to try and shimmy this back on when you're being held up against the seat there. And then same kind of thing, this restricts your movement a little bit too much in the helicopter, so you can't get the angles or move the camera to the position you need it to be to get the shots. And then same kind of thing, you're restricted for movement. This is flapping, it's hitting you in the face from the helicopter. Same thing when you try and do this, it's hitting you in the face. And then whenever the wind blows or you move it too close to your face, the whole thing just comes around. So I really wouldn't recommend a neck lanyard for something like that. What I would recommend is you take a wrist lanyard, and this way, obviously you're gonna have to be a little bit more careful this way, because now you have a hand that's not free. It's like pretty much dedicated to your camera. But now I have a lot more flexibility of where I can move the camera without it constantly being up against my body, having to deal with it behind my neck or loosen it or tighten it. And then there's no way, unless this comes loose, right, that this is gonna come off. Now, I don't know if the helicopter tour is opposed to this. I didn't try and do this when I was there, so I don't know if they would flag this and say, hey, you can't do that. I'm not sure, but I think this would be the superior way to actually strap your camera in. And this way you could actually move the camera out, because you're being held, again, by the seat belt, kind of back up against the seat like that. So it would be nice to be able to completely put the camera out, especially in certain situations. Pretty much when you do these helicopter tours, you need to shoot wide angle. So I was using the 17-28 by Tamron, which I thought would give me some flexibility. I was at 28 the entire time. If I could do it again, I probably would take a 14mm, which sounds crazy, but 14 or 20mm, something really wide, you're really close to this stuff. When you're in the helicopter, you're so close, and it's so awkward that you really don't have time to try and compose or mess with the lens. You just gotta take a quick shot, and a wide angle I think is probably the best option. Even then, at 28mm, I was getting parts of the helicopter in a lot of the shots unintentionally. It was just too hard to get the camera far enough forward. And so if you had this setup where you could actually push the camera out or hold it out one-handed and you were shooting 14mm, I actually think that would be a better setup when you're in the helicopter. Now, after the helicopter tour takes you to the climax at the Weeping Wall, you have a pretty smooth flight back to the airport. Once you land there, it's back to the vehicle, to the bus from there.
Now, for us, we were really tight for time this trip, so quite literally the second we got back to our car, it was time to just start driving towards the Na Pali Coast. Now, I always forget and underestimate how long and how windy the road is to get to the top of the Na Pali Coast State Park up at the top. This is our third time going up there, and it does take you past some really awesome views of Waimea Canyon, but that road is really long and it's really windy, so if you're planning on going up there, go up there a lot earlier than you're originally thinking. Now, just the way things worked out, we didn't have a ton of time. When we made it to the top, it was very cloudy. And then at the last second, there was a little bit of a clearing with a nice sunset, but there really wasn't a ton of time for us to be able to hike a ton.
Now, I've actually been up there before, and I've done a couple of those trails up there in the past. And one thing that you should know about hiking anywhere on Kauai is that it's very dangerous, and it's very hit or miss if the trail is going to be open or closed or restricted. Now, I might have planned this a little bit too tight to pull this off, because we basically just drove straight from the helicopter tour right up to the top of the mountain. Now, that drive does take a long time. It takes you past Waimea Canyon, where you have some really awesome views. Me specifically, I wasn't super interested in shooting Waimea Canyon this trip. I was trying to focus on the Na Pali Coast and the Weeping Wall, and so we just went straight to the top as fast as we could. Now, when we did make it to the top, the biggest thing about hiking the Na Pali Coast is a lot of the better trails that are going to get you into the actual spots you want to be to take photos. They're a lot longer trails. They're 8-mile trails, they're 6-mile trails. They're not something you can do in 2 hours. They're a lot longer, and they take a lot more time devoted to hiking those trails. So we ended up making it back to the hotel really late. I mean, it was like 11 p.m. or midnight. It was pretty late. Just by the time we finally made it back to the hotel, we went to bed pretty early, and then first thing in the morning, I had planned for us to go do this tubing tour through these old tunnels that were used for irrigation back in the 1800s on the island of Kauai. Now, this tubing tour was just an added bonus. I figured while we were at it doing a bunch of the thrill-seeking things on the island, this kind of fit in. I can't remember how I found out about it originally. I probably saw some video of it, thought it looked cool, and wanted to give it a try. Now, I thought I'd grabbed some photos and videos of the actual facility they have where they get you ready and everything. It's actually really cool, but I did an update on my phone and I lost all that video that I filmed on my phone, so I guess I just don't know where that footage went. Now, of course, just like I forgot to bring the camera straps, I also forgot to bring my GoPros on this trip. But one of the really awesome things about this company that does this is called like Backcountry Tours Kauai. I'll leave a link down there in the description. Is you can actually rent a GoPro for $50 a day, and then they'll just give you the SD card at the end of the day. So if you're looking to get videos, super easy, convenient way to do that. Now, when you go to do this, you meet up at one of their locations. They get you hooked up with all the gear you need, things like a helmet and a headlamp and some gloves. And then they get you on a bus and take you up to where they're gonna drop you off to get into the tubes. And the whole thing starts at 8 a.m. and goes till about 11 a.m. So it really only takes about 3 hours in total. I would guess about an hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours of that you're on the tubes. Now, if I remember correctly, there's something like 4 or 5 tunnels in total. The longest one being about 3/4 of a mile long and about 95 feet underground. Now, even with some of those factors with the tunnels, I would still rate this overall as very relaxing. The water moves at a nice, smooth pace. Now, there's really only one point on this tubing tour where you have kind of a water slide effect where it goes a little bit fast, and it's really not that bad. It's not that intense, so something I think pretty much anybody could do at any age. And you're usually in a large group of people. It's not that crazy or that hectic. I really wouldn't call it like thrill-seeking or adventurous. It was really cool, and it's cool to see this, but it's definitely something you could do with young kids as long as they're not scared of these tunnels. Now, you do have guides with you the entire time. There's 3 or 4 of them at any given time, so you do have people there to help if for whatever reason, it's not your thing and you don't want to go through one of these tunnels. Now, there's a good balance here of lazy river type floating where you're just kind of sitting there at a slow pace going through some beautiful areas, and tunnels, I'd say it's about 50-50. About 50% of the time you're actually in one of these tunnels, and about 50% of the time you're outside of one of the tunnels in just some slow moving water. Now, there really aren't any specific destinations or sightseeing things on this. It's not really something you want to take a camera on to take photos necessarily, but it is really cool, and I really would recommend it for pretty much anyone. If you have kids or if you're just visiting, and I just think it's kind of like a one-size-fits-all thing where it really doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing on the island of Kauai. I would recommend this. I think it would be a fun thing to do and check out. Now, there are some spots where the tunnels are quite literally back to back. You're coming out of one tunnel and you're immediately going into the next tunnel. It's pretty interesting, and the tunnels are just interesting the way they look themselves. They're kind of cool. They were made by hand with pickaxes, so they have kind of a weird, distinct look to them, mining type look. Now, that longest tunnel is about 3/4 of a mile long and about 95 feet underground. In this longer tunnel, there is a point where you cannot see the light at either side of the tunnel. I would estimate that lasts anywhere from about 10 to 15 minutes maybe, where you can't see the entrance or the exit, where you're just in this tunnel that whole time. So it's a pretty interesting experience. I wouldn't call it super scary, but it is crazy. You are really far into this tunnel, and the tunnel does take turns. It has very small drops, so it's not crazy like a water slide. It's not that crazy or that fast. It's nothing like what you'd experience at your average water park, but it is just crazy because you're in this tunnel for such a long time. Now, the tour that takes you up there on the bus actually gives you really good views of Mount Waialeale, where the Weeping Well is, and tells you a little bit about that as well and how it supplies all of this water. So it's definitely really interesting if you are interested in the history of the island of Kauai as well. Now, you do reach the end of the tubing tour. They do take you to a location very quickly where you have lunch, and then after that, they drop you back off at the original facility. Now, I wouldn't really rate this as a thrill-seeking experience, but I know there's some people out there who are a little bit more afraid of tunnels and mines and that sort of thing. So let me know down there in the comments below, would you do this tubing tour? Is it something you would try and attempt, or is it something that would just absolutely freak you out? Now, when you go to do the tubing tour, you pretty much don't need to bring anything with you other than good shoes, something like Crocs, or some kind of water shoe. And when you show up, they're going to supply you with a helmet with a headlamp, and then they've got the tubes and gloves and everything else that you're going to need. Now, pretty much immediately after completing the tubing tour, it was time for us to head to go do our final tour of the Na Pali Coast this trip, our boat tour with Captain Andy's. Now, full disclosure, Captain Andy's hosted us for free in exchange for some social media content. Now, they did not tell me, however, that I had to make a YouTube video. In fact, I don't even know if they know this YouTube video is being made or when it's released, if it even exists, so I have no idea. But this review will be totally honest, and I'm just going to tell you what I think about this boat tour without any kind of spiel or selling it to you. This is just what my experience was when we went on it. Now, this is actually the second boat tour I've been on of the Na Pali Coast. The first one I went on was a couple years back, and it was completely different, a very different type of boat tour. Now, the Captain Andy's boat tour is on a catamaran, which is definitely an upscale boat, and it's definitely a more premium luxury way to do this type of boat tour. The boat tour I did before was on a lot smaller, more compact boat, which was designed to be faster and more maneuverable out there on the coast. So the overall intent and vibe of these two different boat tours was completely different. Now, I would also categorize Captain Andy's as sort of a luxury premium boating experience, and it's definitely something that would be really good if you're planning on going with your spouse or some kind of romantic occasion. One thing I noticed almost immediately when getting on this boat was how big it was and how much of a luxury the boat really was. There were nice padded seats everywhere, there were tables, and this was a full-service dinner cruise tour, so of course dinner was provided on this boat tour as well. Now, one of the main reasons why I recommend Captain Andy's and why I actually reached out to them to begin with is because I feel like they're one of the more reputable, well-known, trustworthy, high-end boat tour companies on the island of Kauai. There's a lot of boat tour companies on the island of Kauai. As far as reputation goes, I don't think you'll find many that have one as good as Captain Andy's, and so for that reason, I actually initially approached them. And so I'd seen lots of photos and videos. Captain Andy's is pretty well known for being kind of like the go-to for social media influencers, photographers, and videographers, and for good reason. They provide very high-end boat tours, and they do a really good job. So if that's specifically what you're looking for, is a good experience, or you're looking to get some really good video or content or whatever photos, then Capt. Andy's is just a really good way to go. Now, just something that I think you should know about any boat tour on the island of Kauai, it doesn't even matter what type of boat or what company you go with, or even what time of year, is the water out to the Na Pali Coast is always choppy. Pretty much no matter what, you're going to have a little bit of trial getting out to the actual coast itself. That was the same case for us. This was my second boat tour of the Na Pali Coast, and actually the third time we'd attempted to go out there, because the first time the tour actually got canceled on us due to weather conditions. So that's just something to take into consideration, is that it is highly likely that pretty much no matter what time of year you go, you're either going to have choppy water, and if you go in the winter especially, you are very likely to have the boat tour canceled just because of weather conditions. Now, it was really stormy weather when we went out, and we managed to get pretty lucky, and we got a little bit of a view of the Na Pali Coast, even though there was a heavy rainstorm, and we did manage to catch a couple of rainbows while we were out there as well. Now, I was actually really surprised because the food on this boat tour was actually incredible. It was a lot better than I was expecting, even though I really did have high expectations going into it because I'd heard good things. I was still pretty shocked. So basically, when you get on the boat, you have a full kitchen staff, and then they're going to have the chef comes around and basically gets your order for you. And there's a 4-course dinner basically that's served on the boat. So for ours specifically, it started off with Hawaiian chimichurri surf and turf skewers, and these were probably the best skewers I've ever had in my entire life. They were amazing. So it was like marinated sirloin and like shrimp, and it was just absolutely incredible. Then after that, they bring you basically like a freshly made chopped salad, and then there were a couple different options for the entree when we were on the boat. I ended up going with the grilled center cut filet mignon, and honestly, this might have been one of the best filet mignons I've ever had, which I just did not expect on a boat. Now after that, they bring you dessert, and for us that was a mango key lime cheesecake, which was also really good. Now this boat tour specifically does not get really close to the Na Pali Coast itself, so you get some distant photos, something that would be good with a telephoto lens. This isn't exactly the best boat tour if you're looking specifically to get just a bunch of photos, but this was still a very awesome experience, and it was a really good way to see the coast from the water. Now, of course, with the weather that we just happened to hit the entire time we were on the island, it really was hard to see too much. There were a lot of clouds, which I actually like for the most part for photos, is moody weather. That was kind of what I was going for, but we got just a little bit too much of that. Like I mentioned, we did get a really good rainbow, which was really cool for photos for a little while, but it was just too hard for them to get any closer to the Na Pali Coast simply because of the weather and how intense those waves were. Now, between the two, I think it's a totally different experience depending on what type of boat tour you do. I think the Capt. Andy's boat tour overall was a better experience, and I would recommend it to more people. However, specifically for photographers and people who are a little bit more like adrenaline junkies, or you're just trying to get up in the cliffs, you just want to see the Na Pali Coast as crazy as possible, I would definitely recommend doing one that takes you back up into the cliffs in a smaller boat instead of a catamaran. Now, I'm going to leave links down there in the description to both types of boat tours, the ones from Capt. Andy's that offer either the catamaran dinner sail like we did, or also that smaller compact boat that gets you up there in the cliffs. Now, they actually do offer quite a few different types of boat tours, so you're going to want to do a little bit of research. There's some where you can go snorkeling. There's some where they actually drop you off on the coastline itself. There's some where they just kind of weave you in and out of some of those sea caves. That's kind of the one I'd recommend for taking photos. And then, of course, there's this sunset dinner tour. Now, the boat tour we did with Capt. Andy's, I would strongly recommend to the vast majority of people who are just looking for a relaxing experience and want to see the coast, but also want dinner included. You really can't beat the value there because there's just nothing better than having good food on a boat on the Na Pali Coast. I can't think of anything I would rather do. That really is just kind of the top of the list. So if you're looking for a good honeymoon activity or something to do with your wife, that's where I would recommend that you do the sunset dinner tour. It is definitely targeted a little bit more towards adults. They serve alcohol, they have drinks. It's a little bit more adult friendly and quiet, so I don't know that I would 100% recommend the dinner sunset tour with kids, especially because it's expensive. Now, if you have kids and you're just looking for something adventurous, I'm going to link some of those options down there in the description as well. Something maybe that gets you up on the beach, or some snorkeling where you can actually do some swimming on the coast itself. And then, of course, if you are a photographer or a videographer and you are specifically looking just to get photos and videos, the type of tour I would recommend most, hands down, is the type of boat tour that gets you up close and personal and weaves you in and out of those sea caves. Now, I'm going to find a link for those. I will tag them down in the description by type so you guys can know just exactly which one is going to be right for you.
Now, honestly, I might be a little bit biased, but I really just think that of the ways you can view and experience the Na Pali Coast, there's absolutely nothing that can top the boat tour. It doesn't even matter in my mind what type of boat tour. I just think that the way the Na Pali Coast was meant to be experienced is with those insane sea cliffs towering over you while you're experiencing the raw, rough nature of the waves out there. Now, we did finally make it to the Na Pali Coast itself. They kind of got us in a good position where we could see the cliffs and the rainbow from a distance without getting too close to the cliffs because of the weather. And then they basically flipped the boat around and opened the sail. And as soon as they opened that sail, the whole entire ride just goes from choppy to insanely smooth very quickly. So from there, it's quite literally smooth sailing all the way back to the port. They stop about halfway to give you sunset experience. So when the sun is actually dropping below the horizon, they stop the boat, they let you watch the sunset. Everybody kind of watches the sunset. And then when that's done, they finish with the sail open, taking you back into port. Now, after completing our Captain Andy's boat tour, it was time to head back to the hotel, and we had to get up early in the morning where we would hop on the plane and fly back to the island of Oahu, and that completed our 48 hours on the island of Kauai.
Alright, so I actually took some notes immediately after doing the helicopter tour. I was trying to take into consideration all the different types of people that might be visiting Kauai and the different things they might want when they're visiting. So I rated everything that we did at the moment immediately after doing it on a scale of 1 to 10. So for the helicopter, for the photo opportunity, I would rate the helicopter as an 8 out of 10. It's an excellent photo opportunity that you can get pretty much only by doing the helicopter. I mean, if you wanted to fly a drone in some of those areas, there's some areas where you can and there's some areas where you can't. And that's just one of those places where some of those photos are only possible out of the helicopter. It's challenging, that's why I gave it an 8 and not a 10 out of 10. You're also not there for very long, so you only have, kind of like a split second to get your photo and then it's over. So I would solidly rate photo opportunity 8 out of 10 on the helicopter. Video opportunity. For most helicopter tours, unless you are doing a private helicopter, I would rate this a 7 out of 10. Now, if you're able to do a private charter helicopter, I think this would be much better. But when you're not able to use a gimbal or have some kind of special system for the camera, it's very shaky, and obviously you saw the flicker in some of the video. It's very hard to get the footage that you want. I'm sure there's ways, there's tricks that I don't know about, but for most videographers, especially if you haven't done it before, you can get amazing shots, but it's challenging. Okay, so next up we have the scenic factor. If you're just visiting and you're not trying to get photos or videos or maybe just snap a couple with your phone, but you just want to see some of the beauty on the island of Kauai, 11 out of 10. The helicopter is incredible. It's going to be one of the best ways to see the island of Kauai. It's going to be awesome. The doors off helicopter is very scenic, so solid 11 out of 10 for the scenic factor. Now for the thrill or fun factor, if you're an adrenaline junkie, 11 out of 10. It's probably the most adrenaline-inducing thing you can do on the island, at least in my opinion, especially considering the fact that that specific area, Kauai itself, I believe holds the record for the most fatal helicopter crashes in the United States or something crazy like that. So there have been more helicopter crashes in that area than in anywhere else in the United States because of the crazy weather patterns. So if you're an adrenaline junkie, the helicopter tour is absolutely for you. Now, of course, you might go and you're just going to get a completely sunny day and much better weather, but if the thing with Kauai is that the weather patterns there are just crazy all the time. It's very hard to access the Na Pali Coast any time of year simply because there's so many of these random weather patterns that just make it super challenging. Okay, so for hiking along the Na Pali Coast, how would I rate that for different people? So photo taking opportunity for hiking along the Na Pali Coast is 11 out of 10. There's photos that you can only get on the island of Kauai by hiking up at the top there. Again, it's just with a little bit of a note, like an asterisk, that's like these trails are dangerous, they're not for everybody. Video taking opportunities, 11 out of 10. Some of these spots, it's the only way you can get some of these shots. Video opportunities are crazy when you're hiking the Na Pali Coast. Scenic opportunities, if you're just looking to see things, you're not looking to take photos, again, 11 out of 10. The views here are crazy. The biggest thing, again, is if you're not willing to hike some of the dangerous trails, this just isn't for you. And there are scenic spots at the top, and I'd still rate those views as 11 out of 10. But just take that into consideration. Some of these trails are not going to be easy. Thrill factor, if you're an adrenaline junkie, 11 out of 10. I don't think you could beat the thrill factor of some of these trails. You're hiking on a knife's edge. It's a sheer drop off on both sides. It's the kind of thing you can't really get on any trail that I know of other than Angel's Landing. And even Angel's Landing I've done a few times. I think this is way scarier than Angel's Landing. And then that brings me to the scariness factor. This is an 11 out of 10. It's scary. And when you are doing it, it's slippery, it's muddy, it's wet. It'll rain on you suddenly. You'll have sudden micro bursts of wind that are just absolutely crazy. So if you're scared of heights, this is absolutely not for you. Now, of course, hiking like the Kauai Trail, it's going to be totally different. I have not done very much of that trail. I've only done like the first little section you can do without permits. And so I don't really know what to tell you other than I've seen lots of photos of that hike and it looks amazing. Pretty much everything would be the same except for the scariness factor as far as I know, but it is extremely challenging. So, you know, again, none of these trails are for people who are not experienced at hiking. So how did I rate the tubing tour through these tunnels? For photographers, your photo taking opportunity, this one's a 0 out of 10. That's not really why I wanted to do this one. There really isn't a place or an area where you would want to take a camera there to take photos unless you like taking pictures of tunnels, I guess. I don't really think it would be something you would do to take landscape photos. This is more of an experience type of thing. Now, your video taking opportunity, it's dark inside those tunnels, and so if you take a GoPro, you're going to get some really cool videos. It's wet, so it's not something you're going to want to take your cinema camera on. You do need both your hands a lot of times. So video taking opportunity, I would rate this a 5 out of 10 just because you can get some really cool videos of these tunnels. But if you're a videographer, this isn't something you would do specifically to get videos, I don't think. Thrill factor, the tunnels are really cool, but I wouldn't call this like an adrenaline junkie thing. I would call this like a 2 out of 10 thrill factor. Fun factor though, it's definitely an 11 out of 10. It's really fun, it's really enjoyable, it's really scenic. So scenic opportunity, it's definitely like a 9 out of 10. The only reason why I'm not giving it a 10 out of 10 is because you are in the tunnels for a lot of this. So it's something to expect. You are going to be in the tunnel itself for a lot of this tour, basically. Overall though, I would highly recommend this again to anyone who visits the island of Kauai. Again, I think it's just a really fun thing to do when you're there. So now when it comes to the boat tour, how would I rate the boat tour? Well, I've done 2 different boat tours. So let's start with the Captain Andy's boat tour that we did this time, which is the Sunset Dinner Barbecue Tour. For that dinner tour, for photography opportunities, how would I rate that? I would rate that one maybe a 5 out of 10, just because you're not super close to the cliffs. Maybe that's not fair. In here, I wrote 5 out of 10, but I think that's a lot just because of the weather, and it was kind of cloudy, so they couldn't get us super close. For that specific boat tour, 5 to 7 out of 10 for photography opportunities. It's very scenic, it's very beautiful. There's lots of chances to photograph things, but you're a little far away from the cliffs, and so you need a little bit of a zoom lens or a telephoto, and that's obviously not really the focus of that specific boat tour. Video opportunity, it's the same thing. Probably about a 5 out of 10. I did get some incredible video, but it's not really like the photographer videographer's tour of the coast. Scenic opportunity, it's 11 out of 10. I mean, it's incredible. You get to see the sunset from the boat. You get to see the Na Pali Coast. It's just, sometimes there's even dolphins on some of these tours. So scenic ability, I mean, this is, in my opinion, just as beautiful as the helicopter tour. I think it's absolutely crazy to do these boat tours. I would highly recommend it to anyone if you're just trying to see it. Now, as far as the thrill factor goes, I mean, if you're an adrenaline junkie, this really isn't going to be your thing, the Sunset Barbecue Dinner Tour. But the fun factor of it, I would definitely put it at like a 10 out of 10. Just because you're on a boat, the water's choppy. It's just fun to be on a boat when, they're going fast and you've got some choppy water. I think it is anyway. Maybe some people not so much, but no matter what boat tour you take, even the most relaxing one, you're going to have some choppy water out there on the Na Pali Coast. So now let's rate the other boat tour that I did in the past. Captain Andy's also offers this type of boat tour where it takes you up into the actual close proximity of the cliffs themselves. They kind of take you in. On a boat tour like that, I would rate the photographic opportunity 12 out of 10. I don't think you can beat this. I don't think there's any other way to get these types of photos on the Na Pali Coast. I actually think even the helicopter photos, as cool as they are, and same thing with hiking the coastline, this is the best photographic opportunity, in my opinion, there is on the Na Pali Coast, is getting one of those boats to take you nice and close to the coast itself. you also have more time. Other than hiking, the problem with hiking is those clouds can kind of skunk you out pretty fast. It's kind of hard to get to those spots. The weather is a little bit more intense up there, but when you're down there on the boat, the composition options are just crazy, and the boat's moving around really fast, so you've got lots of options for photos very quickly. Video opportunity, I would rate this one as kind of a 9 or an 8 out of 10. The reason why it's not higher is because the boat can be bumpy, it can be rocky, and so for a lot of videographers, getting smooth video, this is going to be a little bit challenging. You're in a good position to get very scenic footage, but it's challenging. So again, 8 or 9 out of 10, something like that, as far as video opportunity. Scenic opportunity, it's 11 out of 10. Maybe even a 12. The boat that gets you up close, you are going to see the Na Pali Coast in a way that I just don't think you can beat. I just don't think there's anything out there that comes close. As beautiful and as crazy as the helicopter tour is, as beautiful and as crazy as hiking it is, which is very close, I really think just the feeling of being on a boat, being up in those cliffs, is just unmatched. Thrill factor, some of these are really thrilling, and some of them, it really depends on how choppy the water is, but they'll take you back into these caves. Like, they'll take this boat back into the caves. So I would rate thrill factor an 8 out of 10 for a lot of these boat tours to get you really close. They do some pretty crazy stuff, and it's exciting. So if you're an adrenaline junkie, it's probably not going to be the craziest thing you've ever done, but I still think it's really cool. So 8 out of 10 for the thrill factor on the boat that gets you close. Now, just personal preference, my personal favorites. What were my favorite things of the trip? Absolutely favorite thing for me was the boat tour. I think the boat tour, both boat tours that I've done, those are number 1. Number 2 for me would actually probably be the tubing tour. I think I would recommend the tubing tour to just about anybody that goes on the Kauai, and it was really fun. Number 3 would be the helicopter, and number 4 would be hiking. I like hiking there, but it is scary. The wind is really intense, the rain can be intense, and it's just kind of hard to navigate those trails and figure out what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. It's kind of a stressful thing, and I don't know if that's really something I would recommend to someone who hasn't been there before. All right, so now let's go through and break down how much everything cost for this trip in total and how much of it was covered by Facebook monetization. All right, now the original goal was to try and make it so Facebook monetization would pay for this entire trip, the money that we made from Facebook in the month of February and the month of March. So we're gonna go and we're gonna see if we were able to make it within that budget as well. So in the month of February, we made $1,332.28. And then in the month of March, we made $3,042.12. So let's go ahead and add those two up together really quick. Okay, so total budget here from Facebook monetization for our trip to Kauai was $4,374.40. So that's the total. We're gonna subtract the cost of everything we did now, and we're gonna see how we broke even. The flights to get out there from Oahu, $297.67. We'll subtract that. Now we need to subtract the cost of the Turo. That was $268.65. Next, we need to subtract the cost of the helicopter tour that we did. That was $845.88. Next, we have to subtract the hotel. So the hotel for 2 nights was $479.25. Next, we have to take out the tubing tour. The tubing tour was $374.21. Now again, Captain Andy's tour did not cost us anything, full disclosure, but if you were to do the Captain Andy's tour for 2 people, it would be $500 roughly. I'm just saying $530 plus tax, something like that. So let's subtract $530 for the Captain Andy's tour. So after all of that, we still in our budget had $1,578.81. Now hiking on the Na Pali Coast is obviously free. We ended up driving up to the top of the mountain and back down. We had to fill up the car one time, which ended up being about $60 in gas in total to fill it up before we returned it. You really don't have to do a lot of driving when you're on Kauai. There's not a lot of places that you have to drive to, and the island just isn't that big. So if you're there for a long time, you might spend a lot in gas, but for us, it was really only about $50-$60 to fill up the car that one time. Now the flights I mentioned at the beginning, that was round trip, so that did include our flights back to Oahu. So if you subtract that from our original budget, you have the total cost for the trip, which was $2,795.59, which for as much as we did, I really feel like is not that bad. Now, of course, that did not include our flights out to Oahu themselves. So I'm gonna go ahead and do an estimate for you guys really quick. We flew from Salt Lake City to Oahu, and I know our flights were less than $900. I think they were 800 and something, if I'm not mistaken, right? Sometimes you can get flights from Salt Lake City to Oahu for like 675 bucks. So 700, 800 bucks is a pretty consistent thing for flights from Salt Lake City to Oahu. So for the two of us, the leftover amount that we had, let's see if we broke even with the flights out to Oahu that we weren't planning on. So leftover budget was $1,578.81. And total cost, of course, this doesn't include food, but if you count the flights out to Oahu itself, assuming they were $900, I'm absolutely positive they were not that expensive. So this is a little bit of an overestimate, but just overestimating a little bit. Total cost for this trip from Salt Lake City, $4,595.59. Now, everything that we did in this video, everything that I covered, I'm gonna leave links for down there in the description. So the company that did the tubing tour, I'll leave a direct link. The boat tour that we took with Captain Andy's, I will leave a direct link. And the helicopter tour we did with Jack Harter Helicopters, I will leave a link down there in the description below so you guys can check out any one of those. Now, my overall recommendation to you if you're visiting the island of Kauai, even if it's your first time or not your first time, or you're videographer or photographer, I would highly recommend that you try and visit sometime in the late summer, like August or September, I think would be your best bet. Then if you have the chance, go up to the top of the Na Pali Coast State Park, do a little bit of hiking, easy walking up in that area, take in some of the views, and then do a boat tour if you can. If you can do a boat tour with Captain Andy's of the Na Pali Coast, if you want something a little bit more photo, video friendly, do the one that gets you up close and personal. And if you want something a little bit more relaxing, do the dinner tour. Now, if you are visiting with your family and you're looking for fun things to do, or you just want something fun that's a little bit more relaxing, I highly recommend doing that tubing tour as well. Now, pretty much everything you guys saw in this video was taken on the Sony a7 IV. I do have a Nikon Z8. We've also got the Insta360, which I filmed a little bit of that on. This is the Ace Pro 2. I'm gonna drop some links to all the camera equipment that was used in this video down there in the description below as well. Like I mentioned before, this video really isn't a breakdown of Facebook monetization, but I will be doing a video in the future that does break down Facebook monetization. So if you guys wanna see that video, make sure you are subscribed. I will show exactly what I'm doing, but again, it's just the Facebook monetization creator program. There's not much to it other than that. Now, if you want to see some of the photos that I took on this trip or previous trips on the island of Kauai, or even any of the other islands of Hawaii, I'll drop a link down there in the description to my website, as well as my Instagram, where you guys can see some of the videos and photos that I've posted from these trips. Hopefully this answered a lot of your guys' questions about visiting Kauai for photographers or videographers, and some questions about the Na Pali Coast. If you guys still have questions, make sure to leave a comment down there below and I'll try and help you out as fast as I can. Thank you guys so much for stopping by to check out this video. I do a lot of other videos of some of the islands of Hawaii, as well as my home in Utah, taking photos, landscape photos. If you're into exploring new places, make sure you guys are subscribed so you see the next video. And that pretty much wraps it up for this video, so until then, I will catch you guys in the next video.